Welcome to the Back in Time podcast with Kyle and JD, where every week we jump into our DeLorean, cruise to 88 miles per hour, and travel back in time to review our favorite films from all genres and bring you celebrity interviews every single week.
Very good, Lewis. Short but pointless.
Pizza dude's got 30 seconds.
You want me to yank you out of that seat and shake it out of you?
I don't have it. Screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place.
And now, here is your host, Kyle Autry, and his co-host, JD. Welcome to the Back in Time podcast. My name is Kyle Autry, joined as always by my co-host, JD. JD, how are you today?
It's a beautiful day, and I'm super excited for today's episode. We've got one heck of a special for you guys. Kyle, tell them what we're doing.
We've got Jeffrey Weissman from over 70 movies, but you guys would probably know him best as George McFly in Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3. We thought this is so fitting. We're celebrating 100 episodes, and why not talk to the man that played George McFly and get his feelings on the movie and the role. And I mean, we've already wrapped up the interview. JD, what was one thing that kind of stood out to you about the Jeffrey Weissman interview?
Well, he's a fantastic guest. I mean, he's just a wealth of knowledge. The people, the directors, the producers that he's worked with, to be able to take everything from his craft as an actor and to be able to give it back to the community. Man, I was just I almost want to start to become an actor now, just like talking to him. I'm like, that sounds pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, he did make it sound really cool. And it's a longer episode, so let's get to it. And let's bring in our guest, Jeffrey Weissman. So this week on the podcast, we have a very special guest. Our guest today is Jeffrey Weissman. He's an actor, producer, and teacher with over 70 credits to his resume. Jeffrey is one of the stars from the Back to the Future franchise, where he plays George McFly in Part 2 and 3. Jeffrey, thanks for being here today, and welcome to the show.
It's good to be free again.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's this is a real treat for us. And for fans of our shows that, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and we're celebrating our 100th episode this week on the podcast. Yeah, right. Thank you.
Kyle, happy anniversary.
Yeah, and our subject this week, or the film that we're going to cover, is Back to the Future Part 2. So we thought this would be perfect to have you as a guest.
I don't know anything about that film.
Oh, well, shoot. Well, we'll see what we can do here then. So, man, let's start from the beginning, though. At what age did you realize you wanted to be an actor?
Maybe since I came out of the womb. I don't know. I think the doctor looked at me and said, "This kid's a performer," and he used me as a puppet, and I started dancing on the. No, I was pretty young. If you look at the baby pictures from my family's albums and my little toddler and childhood pictures, I'm already kind of being a ham and performing, and I suppose it comes out of my lust for life. I love life and celebrating it and entertaining, and it's, of course, I started entertaining my family early on, and creating mischief. Then became class clown a bit, and that not only got me into trouble, but made me realize that I needed to probably respect where I was entertaining or clowning. And luckily I got mentored early on in grade school and junior high school, and found my way, doing talent shows and little community productions and school productions. And my parents actually didn't want me to be an actor. My mom had acted in her youth, and my older brother had done some acting, and they also ran private clubs in Hollywood and Beverly Hills that had a lot of actor and producer clients, and all they saw them doing was gambling and drinking and smoking and complaining all day, rather than they didn't think it was going to be a good livelihood for me. So they did not encourage me to act. In fact, they wouldn't let me go out and get photos and start my career as a kid. I mostly was regulated to working in school and community theater and local theater. And finally, when I was 17, they saw that I wasn't going to give it up, and I graduated from high school, and they finally gave me a few bucks to go get professional headshots. And in school, I did a lot of shows. Mind you, I was in lots of theatrical productions, and I started doing film with fellow schoolmates and having a lot of fun. My buddy Aaron, through our friend Tom Hester, who won the Academy Award for American Werewolf in London for the makeup on that with Rick
love that
Baker.
movie. Tom
had gotten a bunch of masks from the Planet of the Apes, and we made ape movies. And it was very silly, fun stuff, and various other short films, and I also did stage productions in schools such as Blithe Spirit and Dark of the Moon and Merchant of Venice and As You Like It and on, building the resume. You mentioned I have 70 credits. I've probably got 100 stage credits or more. So when I was finally trying to get my foot in the door, I couldn't wait to get on the sets of big films. I remember actually talking my grandfather into driving me and my friends onto the MGM lot so we could see Dino De Laurentiis' King Kong, and of course we couldn't get past the guard, but we tried. And I would sneak on various sets every once in a while. And also, I remember when I was 14, I had heard that Mel Brooks was shooting a film in our neighborhood. And instead of taking the bus home, I walked home and started seeing people at the Santa Monica Promenade in Victorian evening wear. And there was a gentleman whose fake mustache was flapping. I said, "Excuse me, sir, your mustache is flapping." He goes, "Oh, is it? Oh, thank you. Who are you?" And I said, "I'm an actor." And, "Oh, really? What have you done?" He said. And I explained my theatrical career so far. And he said, "Whoa, that's very nice. Would you like to meet Mel?" I said, "Yes." And he took me to the Mayfair Music Hall where they were shooting the Puttin' on the Ritz number. And I got to meet right away. Marty Feldman was in street clothes. He wasn't in the shot at that time. And he was carrying a man bag. And I thought that was kind of cool. I'd never seen a man carrying a Merce. And I wear one now. So it's kind of, inspiring. And then seeing Peter Boyle in the different shades of green creature makeup, I was like, this is going to be cool. Then when it came out in black and white, I was like, oh no, you can't see wonderful green. Anyway, I finally met Mel and Roy, my friend who introduced me, took me on the set, said, "Roy, you want to meet this kid?" And then Mel stopped and said, "I got no time for kids," and went on. And but at least I got on that set, which was very cool. And Roy Wallach, this professional extra he was, took me to other sets like Medical Center that he was working on and so on and so forth. And I got to be on these major studio sets and play around and hang out and meet the stars and such. And it only, fueled my desire to work. I joined a casting company that would put you in crowd scenes in films. So early on, I worked in like 77, 78 on films like FM, I Want to Hold Your Hand, The Rose, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I got brainwashed by Alice Cooper in that one, I remember. But ultimately, doing crowd scenes or extra work, even though I had some solo extra stuff, it wasn't very fulfilling as an actor. You couldn't really sink your teeth into a role. And I was given advice. I remember I went up on Brighton Beach Memories, and the casting director of that said, you got the talent, you just need some training because no one will take you seriously. So of course I tell all my students, just that. You've got to get good training to go anywhere in this crazy business. So I went for ACT, the American Conservatory Theater in the San Francisco Bay Area. And while training there in my intermediate year and going to classes at San Francisco State as well, I fell into an opportunity, went to an open call and auditioned for Martin Brest for a lead in a film he was casting called The Genius. And I ended up waiting around a while for my screen test because Warren Oates, the only actor that they had attached at the time, died, and they wanted John Lennon, and I think he died. It was really John had died well before that, but Warren Oates died. Anyway, the film went into turnaround, which means it lost its pretty much backing or the agreement. United Artists and MGM had just merged, and I think the execs were fighting each other over what was going to be done. Finally, I did my screen test with Ali Sheedy, and the film was changed. The name was changed to War Games. The day I tested, they were testing Eric Stoltz and Brian Backer and Dana Carvey, and a lot of really great talents, John Stockwell, and none of us got it. Of course, it went to Matthew Broderick, and sure enough, Martin Brest was fired a couple weeks into shooting, and John Badham came in and finished it. I think Martin's vision, even though I was his favorite for the role, I was told by my agent, I think his vision for the film was much darker than what they wanted, and Badham had a lighter touch. You know, the same type of thing happened about a year later on Lady Hawk, where I was set to screen test for that, and Matthew came down in his price. I was like, darn, I was going to rock that because I had done Renaissance fairs and knew my medieval and my Shakespeare, even though they probably didn't even let him do an Elizabethan accent. But
so that means you've got a good Elizabethan accent that we need you to share.
Oh, what ho! How now, Miss Sirrah? Dost thou trifle with myself? Go to, what in thy quips and thy quiddities? I wouldn't probably be that heavy-handed, but...
Oh, that's awesome.
So I had this agent who insisted that I move back to Los Angeles after falling in love with the San Francisco Bay Area. Really great area. And I eventually got my first co-star role on Twilight Zone movie, the segment directed by George Miller with John Lithgow, the remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Yeah, that's a fantastic one that you got to be a part of. I mean, the Twilight Zone movie was a sort of a great project all around, but I mean, how much exposure did you get with Joe Dante or John Landis? I mean, George Miller, Spielberg, this was the who's who of movies.
Yeah, it was, but it was also horribly tainted by the accident on Landis's episode. The accident had happened earlier in the year, and when my agent called me 3 months after the accident to audition for the film, I was like, really? That seems like a terrible thing to do, to try to keep that film going after the tragedy of Vic Morrow's death and the children. Yeah. And she said, Spielberg wants to finish it. The accident happened close to the last day of shooting on that segment, and he thinks he could save it. So I went in and auditioned, and it was really lovely meeting George Miller. He had just come off, of course, success with his Mad Max movies, and it was his first venture into Hollywood. And he was taken just as much as I was by the awesomeness of it all, of being on a Warner Brothers set, studio lot. And we got along really well. And I got cast and loved being a part of this ensemble. Like you say, the cast was filled with really great talent, from J.D. Johnson, the co-pilot, to Abby Lane, the head stewardess, and Donna Dixon, and of course John Lithgow. Watching John work in person is just spectacular. I learned so much from watching all the main talents that I've been fortunate to work with. Watching Clint and his approach. I worked with Clint Eastwood in Pale Rider, and Michael Keaton on Johnny Dangerously, and of course Michael J. Fox and his formulaic type of acting that he honed doing television sitcom. It's really great to see the different craft that the different performers bring to the table and how they make it work for film. And so I use that in my teaching.
That's interesting. And I do want to talk about Pale Rider, because so a few years pass after Twilight Zone the movie, and then you land a role here as Teddy Conway in Pale Rider. Pretty decent sized budget at the time. You're working with Clint Eastwood. It goes on to gross over $40 million at the box office. So, I guess tell us a little bit first on just how you landed the role of Teddy Conway.
I think I have to thank the late great Chris Penn.
Oh, awesome.
In that, I went to high school with Mike Penn, his oldest brother, and Sean was a couple years behind me and was making films in school and such, and from time to time, we'd cross paths. When Sean was engaged to Bruce Springsteen's sister, Pam, I went to their engagement party and showed old movies from junior high and high school. It was kind of fun. And then I worked with him on a Louis Malle film called Crackers in 82 and 83. But then in '84, I guess Chris had met Clint at a party, either at his folks' place in Malibu or somewhere, and Chris, was kind of not aggressive, but forward enough to say, "I want to do a movie with you." And Clint said, "Sure," and he sent Chris Pale Rider and offered him the role of Eddie Conway.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris sort of threw it back at Clint and said, "I don't want to play a good guy. I want to be a bad guy." So Clint moved Chris over to LaHood's son, the creep who attempts rape of Sidney Penny's character and is always making trouble and finally gets shot in the hand by Clint's ghost character there.
Mm-hmm.
And because he had moved over, Chuck LaFont, the actor who was playing Teddy, moved into Eddie, and all of a sudden the role of Teddy was available. Now, in casting in Hollywood, the casting directors will put out in the actors' breakdown services what's available, what they're casting. And my agent was kind of aggressive, and she would always call around to the people she knew at the different lots to see what was casting that maybe didn't come out on breakdown services. And this was one of those roles. She said, "Well, what do you got?" And Lauren Lloyd, the casting director, said, "Well, we'll probably cast this role from our files. We got to take care of." And she goes, "Well, tell me about it. Maybe I have a client." And sure enough, I was close enough to fitting that role. And I went in knowing that I had to cry for my audition because the scene was crying over Daddy's dead body. Spider Conway, my character's dad, gets shot from head to toe. Should I not really reveal any spoilers?
I think it's been out long enough.
I guess so. Yeah, it's 35 years now.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to leave anything to chance. I knew I had to cry on cue, and Fritz Mans, the producer, put me on tape to send to Clint, who was probably location scouting, and I had studied all sorts of different techniques, subjective personalization, where you ground an emotional recall into a prop, or fantasy charging, which is a Meisner technique. Sometimes just living the scene will work. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. And I even had a lock of my grandmother's hair in my pocket.
Oh, wow.
Because she was really the only one in my family who encouraged me. "Jeffrey, if you want to act, do what your heart's desire is. And here's $20, go buy some ice cream." And, I really loved her a lot. And it all worked. On cue, I was able to have the tears shed, and Fritz liked my audition. And sure enough, a week later, I was flying to Idaho, where we were shooting for 4 weeks on location, or longer. We got snowed in for a while. And being on that set and in that ensemble was remarkable. It was so much fun because across the board, I had a mutual friend with Carrie Snodgrass. So Carrie and I started hitting it off right away. And, she was very headstrong actually, saw her character in a certain way that Clint and Michael Moriarty didn't necessarily see. They saw her as a strong woman and independent, but she wanted to take it further and wanted to physicalize more and add more bits and things. And she would butt heads with them. And she came close to walking. And because I was being very friendly and supportive, I would order another round of strawberry margaritas for her and let her talk it out and rave and so on and so forth. And I think I helped keep her on the shoot. And then, of course, the great Michael Moriarty as Hull Barrett, his audition, I understood, was that Clint called back his 6 favorite leading actors of the day and watched them all talk in an informal meeting in his office. And Michael stuck out because he was the one who talked the least and listened the most. And that's why Clint cast him, is what I heard, which is really lovely. And Michael, very sweet man, though when after he goes to town, which my character thinks is kind of dumb, after what happened last time, when he obviously got beat up before and he gets beat up again, when was it Charlie Hallahan, Marvin McIntyre, when those local thugs, beat the crap out of him when he goes to town, I guess in rehearsal or one of the takes, they didn't pull a punch or follow the choreography, and Michael actually broke 3 fingers, and he quit the film. And it took Clint a couple days to get Michael back on the shoot. Apparently, Michael had been commissioned to write a symphony, And on his downtime, he was writing this music, which he had been commissioned to do. And so Clint figured out how he could, in his dressing room, play a mellotone? It's like a keyboard that you can blow through with your mouth and play with one hand. And he was able to compose on that. And so Michael came back on the set. And if you look, for those of you who are obsessive like me, at the details, when Holbert is riding back from being beaten up in town, he's driving the buckboard, he doesn't hide at all that his hand is in a cast. And so look for that next time you're watching Pale Rider. There's quite a few fun things to look for. There's the quick scene where Daddy is being shot, made to dance after he's found the big chunk of gold, and the boys get to go to town and buy candy. And he gets drunk and calls the deputies out, and they make him dance, and then they shoot him from head to toe. It took us 3 days to shoot that one scene.
Oh, wow.
And the first day we had sunlight, and there was some snow on the ground. We had just come from a 3-day blizzard. I remember Clint being very upset that we had to shut production down for this blizzard because it was still October. But nonetheless, the first day was in sunshine. The next day we had a blizzard again. It was snowing heavily. And so if you look at the cuts, they're very quick. From Daddy talking to the deputies in sunshine, the cut over to Brother and I at the Mercantile, and we're in a blizzard screaming, "Daddy, no!" When he's getting shot.
Yeah.
And then we finally get on the third day over to Daddy's body and doing all the coverage. All the snow had melted. And so they brought in the oil-based fake snow to match the first shots of us crying over Daddy's body. And when Richard Hamilton, who plays the Mercantile owner, Blankenship, comes to collect the boys to get us away from the dead body and out of harm's way, the snow is picked up by the wind in chunks, and snow doesn't act like that. So you can tell it's foam snow if you look close. So it was amazing challenges. And Clint had this very interesting thing where he learned, I think, from Don Siegel, the director of the Dirty Harry films, and then who learned, I believe, from John Ford, to shoot the rehearsals. If he got what he needed in the rehearsal, he'd move on. And when it came to me hitting my mark for crying over Daddy's body, Chuck, the other actor playing my brother, went to my spot. He got there before me, went to my spot, so I took his spot at Daddy's head, but slipped on the oil-based snow, almost kicking poor Doug McGrath playing Spider in the head, and then, carried on with the scene. And it was just a rehearsal, so I knew we were going to get it right for the next take. And as soon as I heard cut, let's move on, I knew Clint wasn't going to do a take. And I was like, oh no. So I got into Clint's face and I said, "Clint, Chuck didn't hit his mark. I almost kicked Doug in the head, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "No, it looked fine. We'll cut from your face."
Yeah.
That's so perfect. I mean, is that your best memory or experience that you had directly with Clint?
I have a lot of good.
Oh boy.
But on set, I would say that was the most thrilling, in that being part of the creative process there in the moment of the shoot, I realized, this is going to be a nice close-up on me crying. And I don't think I want to mess with that. Let's go with what Clint wants to do here. Yes, yes.
Yeah, trust him on it for sure.
And, he was a great gentleman, a really compassionate director. He doesn't call action like other directors. He learned, I think, early on that when you call action, actors have a tendency to tense up.
Yeah.
So he would just say, "Whenever you're ready." And
I gotta ask, can you do a good Clint Eastwood impression?
Why do you want to hear that, punk? No, I didn't expect it to be snowing in October. No, he was.
I love that.
He's very intimidating in person. I remember we had just done Brother Eddie's scene with Michael Moriarty on the buckboard, going to town. Ain't that kind of dumb after what happened last night? And he was getting ready to shoot mine. They were setting up for my close-up from the buckboard. And then Clint went ahead of the crew who was setting up that shot. Clint went to go scout out the next shot after that. I followed him because we hadn't really formally met yet. I was already on set in costume, ready to shoot. I had yet to meet the director. And so I followed him, and he's in his duster and his hat, and he's imposing. He's the legendary Clint. And he turns back and he goes, "Yes." I go, "Oh, Mr. Eastwood, my name is Jeffrey Weissman. I just want to introduce myself. We're about to work in the next scene." He goes, "I know who you are. Who do you think cast you?"
That seems really intimidating.
I was like, "Yes, of course, I knew that. Never mind. I'm going back to my spot."
Oh, that's
it's
great.
So funny, though. I've worked with such great big stars. I mean, very wonderful star. I've hung out even backstage with Tom Cruise to Milton Berle. A lot of different people through my career. And yet I still get starstruck. Every time I see Michael J. Fox, I start crying, because Michael is such a great guy, and just the whole, I'm not pitying him with his parts and all, but it just hurts so much that he, of all people, would get afflicted and have, this horrible disease eating away at him. So it's, I'm kind of as the famous musician Richard Thompson called me, a big softie once, because I'll cry easily at a sentimental song that I love.
Oh, that's me. I'm a 6'3", just giant teddy bear. I will cry at everything. So I can relate to that.
Kyle, let's start our club of the big softies.
Well, I want to talk, because here's a perfect transition in the Back to the Future. So Pale Rider debuted at the box office just 1 week prior to Back to the Future hitting the theaters, June 28th of 1985. And then Back to the Future comes out a week later. What do you remember about this time period? And what was your first... go ahead. Sorry.
I remember that Back to the Future took our money.
Didn't give you enough time to rake in the money at the box office, huh?
Well, I remember a couple things. I just posted on Instagram recently a photo of me climbing up a building on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And climbing up a billboard of Pale Rider that was on the and having my picture taken up, with my arms up high. I'm in this. And, I could have been arrested. I probably should have been arrested for that. But nonetheless, I did that. I was so proud and excited. And finally, I got the respect of my parents, my brother, and my family and friends having my name up in lights on Twilight Zone. And then with Pale Rider, that was really nice icing. And so I was very proud of that. And then, of course, with Back to the Future's mystique with the great cast, everyone loved Chris Lloyd coming off Taxi, and Michael, of course, doing his first season of Family Ties, which was a minor hit. And so I went to see the film, and I didn't know Crispin Glover was in it. I had worked with Crispin a year and a half, 2 years previous on a film at the American Film Institute. And I thought he was a fabulous actor, and got his number to stay in touch. And he stole the movie. It really, in a way, if you look at Back to the Future 1 is George McFly's story. And, Marty's kind of a passive hero in that. And then part 2 is Marty's story, and part 3 is Doc's story. And they've never actually intended to do sequels. It was, I think, with the video release that they added "to be continued."
Right.
But, Back to the Bank is what Variety originally called the sequels. So I thought Back to the Future 1 was just a great film. It was what a romp and fun, satisfying film. And through the years, learning all the stories about who almost got cast as who is really terrific, and what scenes were actually cut. After Eric Stoltz, they always wanted Michael J. Fox, but they went, I guess, to the producers of Family Ties first. And because Meredith Baxter Birney was pregnant, they didn't want to let any of the regulars go in case they needed them. So they didn't even tell Michael that he had this potential offer for this film. And so they went to Ralph Macchio, who turned the film down. And they had Eric Stoltz kind of thrown down their throats because he was hot off Mask, which I had auditioned for too. Ironically, this is, I know, sidetracking here, but when I was managing a building, a Victorian up in San Francisco while I was going to school up there, there was this biker couple in one of the back flats. The wife would show me pictures of her sons. One, unfortunately, had passed away from AIDS, and the other had this terrible facial deformity.
Okay.
And years later, I ran into her. Her name was Rusty. And I said, Rusty, I've got to ask this. Did you let someone write the story of your son with the facial deformity of Rocky? And And she goes, yeah, I had a friend who was interested, and I gave him permission. So I said, Cher played you and Eric Stoltz. I almost played your son, Rocky, because I auditioned for Bogdanovich, and I didn't know that it was a facial deformity. They only told me it was a tumor, and I
Wow.
probably would have played it differently on the audition. But Eric got it, and Eric was hot. And so they Universal went with Eric, kind of forced him on them. And of course, Eric is a very serious leaning actor as opposed to the sitcom-y Michael J. Fox, which they wanted.
Right.
And so, needless to say, it wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't the light touch that they wanted. And ironically, they almost didn't have Chris Lloyd. When Chris was offered the role, he threw the script in the trash.
The trash, yep.
Yeah, he wanted to do legit theater. He had enough of TV. He got signed to do this play with Colleen Dewhurst. And he had told his girlfriend previously, no stone unturned, and I want to look at every project that comes. And the show with Colleen Dewhurst got postponed because she got sick, and then it got postponed again. And he goes, my God, what am I going to do for work? And
That was great, by the way.
He goes, what's this? And she said, well, you said no stone unturned. I pulled this out of the garbage. And he said, oh, let me take a look. And yeah, I can do this. In the meantime, they were looking at, at one point they were talking Dudley Moore or Bill Cosby. They wanted John Lithgow, Jeff Goldblum. They were looking at a lot of different possibilities for Doc Brown. But Chris, couldn't imagine if it was Jeff Goldblum and Eric Stoltz.
Oh, geez. I could see Lithgow, though. I could see Lithgow in that role.
And John was taking a year off. I remember I was in communication with him over another project that I was helping cast. And I said, John Lithgow or Jeffrey Tambor? And John said, I got to spend a year with the kids. He took a year off after lots of work. And Jeffrey Tambor got that role when I was casting. So John passed on Back to the Future. And, Johnny Depp auditioned to be George McFly.
That definitely could have worked as well. He's
very interesting stuff.
He's done pretty well. Let me ask you this, if you have an opinion on this or not. Do you think the Stoltz footage should ever be released?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, that's what I think they should put it out. I mean, I don't think it's a disrespect to Michael J. Fox to put out a special feature with somebody else.
Fans would eat it up. They've been clamoring for it forever. It's just you want to pay everyone,
right?
For that release. Eric might want final say on the cut. I don't know. It's the things in the archive. I would love to see my screen test for War Games, and I would love to see lots of my other cut. I have several feet of film that was cut from Back to the Future Part 2. I came in, in the 11th hour. I think they thought they still had Crispin, but they needed a backup plan because things were getting, I guess, touchy with the negotiations. But I don't know if you want to go there yet. We're still on part 1.
Yeah, I think JD had a couple questions, and then we're going to get to part 2 for sure.
So I'm a big, I can relate to you when it comes to theater, and, I'm a regular at Ren Fair and all of that too, but I sort of geek out when it comes to these big movies and when they hit theaters. Now, for you, were you in the seats watching Back to the Future, and what was your response if you were?
I had, at the time I was cast, I was in between film and TV roles in about 87, and auditioned to play Stan Laurel at the Universal Hollywood theme park.
Oh, wow.
And the actor playing Oliver Hardy actually knew my work. I had played Mercutio at a production of Romeo and Juliet in Hollywood, and I was really doing Stanley wrong. I remembered Laurel and Hardy from childhood, but not well.
Mm-hmm.
But he turned to the boss and said, this guy's got talent, I'll train him. And within a couple of weeks, I was doing a passable Stan Laurel, and then kind of worked my way into being probably one of the premier Stan Laurel impersonators in the world, having made friends with Stanley's daughter, Lois Laurel, and the family, and being respected and invited to a lot of the Sons of the Desert, the original Laurel and Hardy fan club, around the world. I've done appearances for them. And then a year later, in 88, started playing Charlie Chaplin, and then 89 playing Groucho Marx, and all for the Universal on the tour. So while I was sent by Universal to ride in the Macy's parade as one of these characters, I think it was the year I was playing Charlie, in the parade, might have been Stanley, the Back to the Future movie premiered. And I called the AMC theater there in New York, and I said, I'm in town and I play George in this. Do you think you could hand me a pass or two? And they said, how many do you want? We have Elizabeth Shue across town with her family coming to another theater. I was like, oh, far out. And so all the actors that had gone to New York with me to ride in the Macy's parade and our supervisors and everything, luckily I got them all in to the premiere, at least the premiere opening. It wasn't the premiere in Hollywood. It was thrilling. You know, when I myself, actually, not my agent, negotiated to get the 6th billing on the title card because my agents failed to do that for me. And since I had co-starred and got title cards on Pale Rider and other films, it would have been a step backwards in my career. And so I talked with Bob Zemeckis while we were shooting. I said, you know, Bob, I really would like to get a title card. And he said he wouldn't give me a solo, but he would consider giving me a shared one. And after Bob Gale and Neil Canton and the producers found out about this, they blew their tops. They were, you know, obviously trying to keep me a secret. It was weird. You know, it was like, why are Spielberg and Kennedy, Marshall and Gale and Canton pulling a fast one? Well, they had cornered themselves. First of all, in the trades, they had said all the original cast members are returning to reprise their roles. And then, of course, Claudia, for some reason or another, it's interesting spins on different stories I've heard, couldn't return to do Jennifer. So, and Zemeckis had worked with Elizabeth Shue on Adventures in Babysitting, and she was a terrific actress. So they put her in that role. And with Crispin, I think the negotiations went on really into the 11th hour, though they had contacted me, or I got submitted actually through an agent that they had found Michael's photo double through, Kevin. He asked if I knew who Crispin was, and I said, of course. And he said, well, what do you think? Do you look like him? And I said, not at all. In fact, he's taller than me. I said, but is this for the Back to the Future sequels? And he said, I'm not at liberty to say. And I was like, oh, okay.
Which means yes.
Yeah. I said, get me in there. And so I met with the assistant directors, and, you know, I said, you know, I know my way around a set. I've worked on these films and such. Then I met with casting and auditioned, and I guess all those things went well. And then I started going to makeup to be fitted for body cast and then prosthetic makeups. In my mind, they still had Crispin, that they needed George in two places at the same time, like they did with, you know, Michael up on the catwalk and on stage playing simultaneously, you know, those type of scenes. So I was kind of kept in the dark. It was my makeup artist, like a week before we were to shoot, said, oh, you know, Crispin's out. Huh. And I was like, huh?
Yeah.
You can't make this movie without him. So I think what had happened was that Crispin just made too many demands. He obviously wanted the same money as Leah and Tom. I had heard other things that he wanted more money than that, and at one point, and he wanted script approval. And you know, over the last 30 years, I've heard a lot of different spins and a lot of different. Some are fact and some are fiction. So it's been really odd to see the battle continue. But you know, after part 3 came out, Crispin ironically found me, told me his sad sob stories of being made to cry in front of the extras by Bob Gale, and the trimming of his hair unauthorized when he fell asleep in Ken Chase's chair. And,
oh, no.
And, you know, all these different things that Crispin disappeared for a while, according to the producers, when they needed him to shoot, and that he insisted that a painting he and Leah made in rehearsal be part of the McFly household, you know, and anyway, he rubbed them the wrong way. They rubbed him the wrong way. It was difficult, and it may have reflected in the Paradox script, which was part 2, part 3, in the same script when it was originally put out. Mm-hmm. That they had George kind of tortured, you know, all that hanging upside down.
Right.
I don't think that was. I think that was meant for Crispin, as actually another crew member told me. So it was kind of difficult. Even during shooting, Spielberg came up to me and said, "So, Crispin, I see you got your $1 million." And I was like, "Huh?" Which was kind of rude. But it's hard to see Crispin pick a battle with Spielberg and company and Bob Gale. At the same time, he was making a name for himself as a very fine actor with all the work he was doing. So I think he, in his mind, wanted the respect of the money and the things he insisted on, and yet they didn't see it. So sure enough, me wearing the prosthetics to make me resemble George, age 17, was enough, tied in with a couple close-ups of him from the first film, was enough impetus for him to get an attorney to say, sure, we'll represent you. And he sued. And of course, he was dragging it out, subpoenaing everyone, deposing everyone. So Universal eventually said, you know what? I don't think we're going to win this, and we'll settle out of court. And they gave him $750,000 to go away, which I'm sure his attorneys took half of.
Right.
But, so it never went to court. It settled out of court, and the Screen Actors Guild passed a rule saying producers can't make an actor look like another actor without the original actor's permission, which is a beautiful thing.
Right.
But still, it's so odd because 30 years on, Crispin still has a grudge and is like milking it beyond belief. And Bob Gale still has a grudge. And it's like, you guys get over it and shake hands and do something for Michael's charity, for God's sake. Everyone would pay top dollar to see a reunion like that, where all the producers, directors, crew members, and cast came together to celebrate the trilogy and Michael and raise money for Parkinson's.
No, I think that's an amazing idea right there. That would definitely raise a lot of money.
Now, band could play.
Yeah. And now I want to talk a little bit about your casting process. So according to the book, Back to the Future, The Ultimate Visual History,
beautiful.
Yeah, and I love that book. You met with casting director Judy Taylor, who had you audition using the scene from the first movie where George is hanging the laundry. Yes. First off, I assume this is correct, and do you remember anything from the audition?
Yes, that I did it. I remember, going into the casting room, and there were other guys who I figure were up for the same part, and I was very friendly, and I was like, gosh, I got some competition, but I'm just being a photo double. I don't necessarily have to act to be George, but I was pretty good at imitation, so yeah. I did a little bit of imitation and brought a little bit of Jeffrey to it as well, and I guess they liked it enough. And I had auditioned for Judy and Fenton and various other folk over the years, so they knew I had credibility. I don't recall. I don't think I was reading. I think I was reading with a casting associate, not with another actor.
Okay.
So let's talk about the infamous pizza scene, which, if I'm not mistaken, took 3 full days to shoot. So in your opinion, Jeff, from a filmmaking standpoint, can you explain to our audience why a scene that is only a few minutes long took so long to shoot and what intricacies went into that shot?
Are you kidding? How long am I on screen? About 30 seconds, and they hung me upside down for 2 weeks. I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. There was, that railing that my ortholev is hung on, that I'm hung from, started from outside the front door, went through the living room, through the sort of by the rumpus room where Marty Jr. is watching TV, into the kitchen. When we finally got into the kitchen, I think that was probably a week and a half into the shoot. Oh, gosh. And first of all, Pizza Hut, with product placement, paid probably their $100,000 to have their wrapper in there. They had 6 gals behind the set cooking fresh pizzas constantly. So the soundstage smelled like pizza, pepperoni pizza, forever. And I don't think anyone on that set wanted to have pizza probably for a month after that. Yes, it was pretty much pre-digital, and the VistaVision camera that we used, which had been used on a few other films where the primary actors had to play multiple roles, like the Bette Midler, Lily Tomlin film and various other ones that they had to be in multiple places at the same time. It was a very unique camera. A fellow named Tondro had designed a program to run this camera where you could actually somehow splice the film inside the camera, roll it back, or parts of that film would run and you could line it up where the actor was playing the multiple roles. So as you know, Marty, Marlene, and Marty Jr. are all at the dinner table passing the iced tea to each other and talking and so on and so forth. And it would take, of course, for Michael's old Marty makeup, it takes 3 to 4 hours to apply that. All the old age makeups took 3 to 4 hours to apply, as well as my young George makeup, of course, took 3 to 4 hours to apply. So we would shoot with one character, do the very carefully choreographed stuff. We would, after the choreography was set, the business was set, we would have to really nail it down and not deter from it, because the camera could not, once it's set, the camera could not deviate from it. And then once we got Michael in one character, he would go change. We'd wait for 3 hours. Sometimes we'd do some coverage, other shots, and then we'd come back, shoot that stuff, and then he'd go change into another character. And we didn't have Michael all the time. He was shooting the last season of Family Ties during the day, and then we'd have him all night, do coverage around when we didn't have him. So the days, especially in that scene and others there in the McFly 2015 home, those were 19, 21, 26-hour-long days, I recall, on my timesheet. So there was great overtime. And I was like, Michael, when do you sleep? And he said, in the limo in between the studios. It was like, the guy was a workhorse. To answer your question, it was mainly because of that, and we'd have technical problems from time to time. We came in one morning, and we had an earthquake while we were shooting that scene, and Bob Zemeckis was afraid that we were going to have to start from scratch. Luckily, they had something to cut away to, or something that prevented that from having to take place. And then there was stuff, as you can see in the bonus features, there's a scene called Pizza. Remember, I mentioned I was fitted for a body cast. They had a shot of me as old George hung upside down into the kitchen. Lorraine pulls out the pizza and sets the pizza down on the floor and says, George, rotate your axis for pizza, for dinner. And I go, okay, and I rotate. And I'm in a body cast with a pole that came out the back of my costume. The costume is over the body cast, and the pole goes through the set with a wheel on the other end. And a special effects guy from ILM, would spin me on the cue, on the 4, and it was very funny, but it didn't really match. She had put the plate on the floor. There wasn't a place for me at the table. That's where the camera was. I also looked bulky with the costume on over the bodysuit. So I don't think any of that worked, and that's why it didn't stay in the final cut. I'm pretty sure that, and also there was another bit I did. Remember, fruit, please, and the fruit thing comes down. Yeah. And Lorraine says to Marlene, give your granddad a piece of fruit. And I was handed a banana, and I tried eating a banana upside down, and the peel kept slapping me in the face. I was comedy bit I was doing. Zemeckis laughed at, and I thought, oh, this will be good to have a laugh. Yeah. I need a laugh in this movie, damn it. And of course it was cut. Though I do have stills from that cut scene. That's a pretty cool thing to have.
Yeah. We're fast approaching the 30th anniversary here, coming up in November. What's your favorite memory if you look back at the filming and just, the whole making of this movie for you?
I loved being a part of that cast and on that set. It was so wonderful. Zemeckis and the casting department producers put together such a great ensemble. I know they had 8 weeks with Stoltz to work. So everyone was over-rehearsed or, very well prepared for the reshoots with Michael, but they were such a tight unit and knew, and Zemeckis is very smart and confident in first hiring a great crew and then casting very confident talent. So he could just sit back and watch the creative process and then troubleshoot whenever problems arose. He's very, very adept at that with all his films. I think he does that. Mm-hmm. He may, when he doesn't have such time-consuming special effects things to troubleshoot, he may do more and more takes for dramatic purposes or comedy honing. And then he respects his cast very well. At one point, I remember, and you never hear this, at one point, Michael called cut on a scene we were shooting, and I think this was at the high school, Hill Valley High School, on location. And he said, "Cut, cut." I didn't even believe that myself. And that's a true pro. First of all, it's the biggest no-no for an actor to call cut.
Yeah.
But if it's not resonating truthful and he knows it, that's wasted footage. So, and of course, Zemeckis will let him get away with that because he's Michael. But also, it's really someone who knows their craft and their sense of truth and authenticity. So I loved being on all these sets with this great cast. So I can't say that there was one moment in particular. There were many, many highlights. Finally, at the end of the first week, when Michael first saw me, he saw me in the young George makeup because we shot the Enchantment Under the Sea footage and Biff fight up first. And he saw that footage, or rather that makeup that I was in, and said, "Oh man, Crispin ain't going to like this." And I was like, "Oh dear, how am I going to make friends here?" But by the end of the first week, he was resigned to obviously what was going on, and we were able to have a beer in his dressing room and his trailer and chat and have a good time and get to know each other. And as well, other folk on the set warmed up to me. I had a lovely time in between takes hanging with Billy Zane, and it took many years for me to finally get to know Chris Lloyd, and he and I had become fairly friendly, and other cast members, Leah and I, are friendly, and it's nice to be a part of this legendary trilogy that has been rated in, I guess, the top 10.
So you've talked a lot and you've discussed what the process of getting into this part and fitting the role. But for you, what was the most challenging part of taking the helm of George McFly and taking over for Crispin Glover? Is there one thing that you would be like, "Holy shit, that was challenging"?
It was challenging not knowing if they had permission to use Crispin's likeness. It was. So
that was something that you were worried about day to day. Like, was that like giving you anxiety, and you were like, "Oh my goodness."
I was like, "Am I a scab? Is this what's going on here?" And that was very uncomfortable making. But here I was with Spielberg and company, the top producers in Hollywood. So I figured they had crossed their T's and dotted their I's, and that everything was copacetic.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would feel the same way, like in any role. Like if you were working from a grocery store to some office, if you sat at a desk and you didn't know, is somebody else supposed to be sitting here?
Yeah. It was odd. I figured Crispin had another project that he was doing and he couldn't do it. And he was so integral and great in the first film. I figured it was heartbreaking for him, but he had a better offer somewhere else, and that they couldn't get him out of it. Little did I know that wasn't the case.
Yeah. We'll kind of move on from Back to the Future 2. And, I personally, I want to talk about one of my favorite shows growing up, Saved by the Bell. You have a role as the high geek in the episode Rockumentary. Do you have any memories from the set of Saved by the Bell?
Oh, sure. It's funny that I was looking at, Facebook does these memory things and flashbacks, and I have this odd photo of me in the bottle, what do you call it? The bottle glasses, the half inch of glass where my eyes are huge. I was like, oh yeah, I was trying to get nerds for a while. I had been up on Revenge of the Nerds, and I just found my script to my science project, and I was up on The Creator, and all these 80s projects that featured nerds. Even War Games he was a bit of a computer nerd. And I had, through doing live performances, I do characters at parties all the time. I had goofy fake teeth made, and I had the thick glasses, and I wore my hair straight up often as Stan Laurel, who got it from a music hall performer named Dan Leno, that effect. And I thought, well, I'll just go in there, since this is the high geek, since he's this uber nerd, I'll just blow it all out. And I put the bottle glasses on and the fake teeth and had my hair stand up straight. And I went in there and kind of blew him away with my uber nerd and got the role. And one of the things I remember, the other guest star that week was Casey Kasem. And
Casey Kasem.
Yes, he was the narrator of the fantasy episode where the kids from Saved by the Bell become a rock band and hugely successful, and all that comes with it till the band splits up. So I had if you remember the episode, as the high geek, Screech comes to me for advice because the band is broken up and everyone's upset. And I tell him to marry a cheerleader and move to the beach. And I make the magic retainer appear that'll bring him good luck. And I originally had the retainer come out of my fez. I was wearing a fez. I was going to tape the retainer to the inside of it to reveal that my hair is standing straight up, which was a very funny sight gag. But Casey Kasem, who was Muslim, went to the producer and complained that I was making fun of his religion by wearing this fez.
Oh.
So that was very disappointing. I was like, Casey, come on. This is in the name of comedy. This is not to insult Islam. Nonetheless, I had to bow to Casey and lose the reveal of the hair standing up. So when it opens up, you see my hair standing straight up. I'm in the buck teeth and the glasses. And the magic retainer comes out of a spittoon.
I totally remember that episode because they would come on every morning right before school, and they would play those shows on just repeat. So
yeah, I was for a while there. I was getting $10 every 6 months as a residual. I was like, thank God, I need this money. Elizabeth wasn't able to be in that episode. She was on set, but she had broken her leg in a skiing accident, so She was there. It was nice to get to know that whole cast of very sweet kids. And I thought Dustin was a great kid. His dad, as it turned out, I guess, absconded with all his money or something. I don't know. Poor kid.
That's happened to quite a few child actors.
Yeah, but there's a law. The Coogan's law is supposed to prevent that. I don't know.
So, Jeff, I know you're super busy right now with projects. You got a handful of movies that are in pre and post production. Is there anything that you want to talk about or discuss with our audience to sort of put where you are on the map and where they'll be able to see you coming out in the future?
Sure. First of all, Back to the Future related events. I put a band together called Mr. Fusion that was made up of members of the cast. We had Mark McClure, Dave McFly on drums, Don Fullilove, who played Mayor Goldie Wilson on bass. I play guitar, and we have Harry Waters Jr., who played Marvin Berry, Chuck's cousin, as our lead singer. And I put together the band for a fundraiser cruise for Team Fox, the Back to the Future cruise to end Parkinson's in 2015 for the trilogy's 30th anniversary. May be putting the band back together for a few events. One that was scheduled to be in Chicago in July, unfortunately just lost one of its sponsors, so the producer postponed it. So look for that to be rescheduled. But we are hoping to appear at the We're Going Back fan celebration in Los Angeles in October. Late October, third week of October. I think if you go to Back to the Future, let's see, We're Going Back fancelebration.com or Google that. Also, these events will be posted on the BTTF or the backtothefuture.com website, which has been just revamped and is gorgeous. And shout out to Stephen Clark, who's been running that and doing an amazing job for the Back to the Future family and fans. Also, Terry and Oliver Holler, who built their own time machine, 15 years ago. They've taken that time machine around the world, raising money for Michael's charity. And I think they've raised close to $1 million by now. And they started last year producing a Back to the Future Part 3 fan celebration up where they shot the films in Sonora. They do a 3 or 4 day event where they find the DeLorean in the Delgado mine. You get to zip line as Doc Brown did from the clock tower. There's a Hill Valley festival with the band. It may not be all of ZZ Top, but at least the band that backed them up in the movie play it. They do just remarkable events. They even do a pop-up drive-in theater where Hill Valley was built for the movie out there in outside of Sonora. Cool. It is an amazing fan event. They're almost sold out. So they're at back to1885.com, or they'll also have a link on their tothefuture.org, I'm pretty sure. And also the Back to the Future fan site will have it. Or you can email me and I'll send you to it. Go to jeffreyweissman.com and you can email me from my site.
I'm deathly afraid of heights, but I might zip line from Clock Tower.
Yes, with Doc's wig and coat on and going, oh!
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I have various projects, like I'm just about to wrangle a cast of 50 for a living history show out in Old Sacramento for their waterfront days this coming weekend. I'm putting together a one-man show about Mark Twain's shadow life. A lot of people don't realize he almost died several times as a child, and then he lost his little brother, and then he went AWOL in the Civil War when he was a Confederate. He lost his favorite daughter. He blew 2 fortunes, including his wife's fortune. Anyway, it has a lot of very traumatic things that happened in his life that I don't think people know about, and I'm writing a one-man show based on that. I had played Mark Twain in a PBS film that premiered last year called Jerusalem, or Dreamland, Mark Twain's in Jerusalem, about his 1867 trip there to the Holy Land that Martin Sheen actually narrates. So when I started playing Twain, I've developed this and learned so much about him that I think that I want to do this one-man show since Hal Holbrook is now retired. So I've got that in the works. And I'm always working on something. I have a couple independent films. I also have some films that my students are developing that I'm a part of. So I'd like to keep busy, even though I'm 60 now.
So you've mentioned a couple times about your teaching. Do you want to go explain a little bit more about how somebody could find out about your classes, what your teaching
sure.
methodology is? Go ahead and feel free to plug that, because I know we have a lot of people that are interested in taking the next step in their careers. So
because Los Angeles traffic was driving me crazy. It's way overpopulated there, and there's traffic jams all the time, and I was becoming a bit of a monster. I got out to also support my wife, who's in the wine trade. So we moved up to the wine country, and where I can breathe a bit easier and not drive so crazily. And and I continued teaching up here. You don't have to be in the Bay Area to study with me. I have students that I Skype teach with around the world. I have a student up in Alaska currently. I have one who's just moved to New Orleans, who is a pro football player, who's just done amazing work, believe it or not, one of my best students. And then I teach over in Berkeley currently at the Bay Area Professional Actors Studio, and you could go to their Bay Area Professional Actors Studio.com or bayproact.com. I'm currently in an 8-week course there. I also teach at the San Francisco Acting Academy. And then I'll guest teach. I go to festivals. I go to film festivals and expos, and I'll also come to theaters and do guest artist teachings from time to time. So I could come to your town if you get a handful of actors that want to bring me in, and firmly believe in exposing talent to the many different techniques and tools that are out there, because I don't believe one size fits all. I think you should try some Meisner technique and some Strasbergian exercises and Stella Adler and some Jeff Corey. The acting masters all have put out their tools there, and trying them all. And then I have a fabulous cold reading technique that you have to have for auditions. And then I cover the business of acting. So I'm pretty thorough, and I mentor a lot of talent. A lot of my talent are working in Hollywood.
That's awesome. Jeffrey, at the end of every episode, we ask 5 short questions to our guests so we can hopefully learn something new about them, just some fun questions. These can be rapid fire, or you can expand if you want. But what was the first car that you ever purchased on your own?
I think it was a 67 Volvo 122S.
That's awesome. And how long did you have it for?
Oh, at least 4 years.
Okay. Great
dual carburetor, and built like a tank. Ran on regular gas, and was a good workhorse.
What was your first paying job?
Professionally, I think I was 14. My parents drove me to a place called the Impromptu Bagel that had an open mic night, and I did a performance of a section of Cyrano de Bergerac where I played probably about 14 characters. And and when I was done, an old guy in the audience handed me some money.
That's awesome. There you go. Natural born ham, like you said at the beginning. Okay. This one may be a little bit tougher. Who's your favorite Batman?
Oh, gosh. because I worked with Michael Keaton, I liked him. I thought he was great, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say, I wanted, what's the word, dedicated, or, I liked Michael. I thought he was great.
Yeah, I'm actually partial to Michael Keaton as well. I think he's awesome as the Batman.
Who's the guy now? He's like, talking this kind of way.
Christian Bale.
Christian, and then what's his name?
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. It's like they're both stuck in this crap, and it's like, who coached you on that? Get over it. Anyway. Well,
recently they've just announced that Robert Pattinson from Twilight fame is the new Batman.
Ooh.
I don't know. I you know what? He's done really good work after Twilight. But the hate online has been, well, he's the guy from Twilight. Well, come on, he was a kid. Since then he's done some pretty good roles.
And that was a nice beginning there at Twilight. My friend Catherine Hardwicke directed that. I helped her with her first film project and I just found the script of that, going through script boxes. It was called Road Girls, that she and Michael who went on to write Mask and other films.
Oh, nice.
They had this sort of spec project they wanted to do, and little Lisa Wilcox was in it, and Carl Bressler, people who later on made careers for themselves in the business, were a part of this project. And of course, Catherine, who skyrocketed with 13 and Lords of Dogtown and then Twilight, directed it. And it was really kind of fun to find stuff I helped people with back in the early 80s. I helped John Schwartzman and Greg Araki do their thesis project in school. A lot of different people along on this path that I've rubbed shoulders with and worked with. I've been very fortunate.
That's really cool. What's the last song that you listened to?
Ooh, let's see. Yeah, it'll be pretty obscure for you guys. It was called Drivin' by Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, who was a San Francisco group back in the early 80s. And my friend Hillary was the bass player.
That's awesome. Now, are they, is it rock group, jazz?
They were new wave. The band broke up when Pearly Gates kind of fell for Mick Jones of the Clash and went off to London to be with him. And the band looked at each other and said, "What happened?" But they were great. A very peppy, wonderful group whose CD of their first album has finally just recently been released from, what was it, 1979, 1980?
There you go. And then sticking with the music genre, if you could go to one concert for a band, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, brother. I've been a DJ for probably as long as I've been acting, well, at least 35 years. And my tastes go from A to Z, from, Air to Zappa to Brian Ambient to classical to Grateful Dead to, I and jazz. I love Miles Davis. And that's a very, very difficult question. I would say what's one of those fundraiser concerts where all the bands play and everyone gets to play. That's a tough one, you guys. Gosh.
Yeah, if I could make it out of there safe and hydrated, I think I'd go with Woodstock. One of those.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. That was a beauty. Or Monterey Festival or Isle of Wight. Those rock and roll behemoths were amazing lineups.
There you go. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You guys, you can follow Jeffrey. He's at jeff.weissman on Twitter. That's JEF.WEISSMAN. And you can visit his website at jeffreyweissman.com. I know you sell some stuff on the website. Go ahead and plug your website a little bit, and just, if I'm leaving out anything on how people can get in touch with you, feel free to drop that.
Yeah. Also on Instagram, I'm Jeffrey J. Weissman on Instagram. You can follow me there. On the web, jeffreyweissman.com, JEFFREYWEISSMAN. You email me from there because I haven't had the wherewithal to update that website much. And I can send you what I have available on photos I can sign. And also, Pizza Hut wrappers and action figures. I think there's only one person that I know of out there that has both Crispin's and my signatures, autographs on one of the action figures. Oh,
wow. That'd be a really cool get if somebody could do that.
It doesn't really look like Crispin and doesn't really look like me. So, it's a...
And yeah, if somebody is running a convention or a con, I'm sure you can reach out to Jeffrey on the website as well for bookings.
Absolutely. And I've helped put cast members and crew members together for cons in the past, and happy to help make your show successful. It seems that, Michael, Leah, Tom, and Chris get most of the cons these days, since Tom is finally doing shows and Michael is finally doing shows. In fact, I had done the London Comic Con, a few shows for that producer, and ran into him at the Gallifrey One, the Doctor Who show. And he said, Jeffrey, we love having you over. I want to do a Back to the Future 30th reunion. How do we get Michael and Tom? I said, well, I'll write them and tell them how well you've treated me. And then if you, probably throw a chunk of change at Michael's charity, that would probably be more prone, because Michael didn't do any cons before that.
Right.
He did a surprise appearance at the first reunion in 2008, but that was just, stop in, hi, and goodbye. And sure enough, that London Film Comic Con in 2015 was Michael's first show. And then a year later, Tom started doing shows. And that's it. It's washed up for the rest of the cast.
Yeah, so reach out to Jeffrey. Give him some love, too. Get him out to the conventions. I know we've got one in Fort Wayne, Indiana here. I'm going to shoot him an email myself. We got to get Jeffrey out here.
Kyle, thank you. And then, you've got to join the big softy club.
We'll hug it out like grown men do that are softies, and we'll grab a beer, maybe some dinner.
Hey, JD, we have some support.
Absolutely. That's a hell of a time.
Thanks again for coming on the show, Jeff. This was awesome, man.
No spooning. There's no spooning just yet. All right. And thanks for having me on, guys. Please send me a link so I can share on my social media.
We will definitely do that. Okay, we've just wrapped with Jeffrey Weissman. That was a great episode. Make sure to, again, follow him on Instagram and Twitter, and check out his website, jeffreyweissman.com. Reach out to him for bookings if you run a convention. I'm sure he'd love to come out there with some of the cast from Back to the Future, so he's got the hookup. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're at backintimepod. You can email us at backintimepodcast@gmail.com. Follow JD at his blog, backintimepod.com. I'm at KAutry29. JD's at Unjust Justin, and we are out of time. Time to get back into the DeLorean, punch in today's date, and return back to present day. We'll be back tomorrow with episode 100. See ya.
100. I can't believe it's been 100. Thank you guys for listening to every one of them.